On behalf of Amaljodi College of Engineering, it is my privilege and pleasure to extend to you a warm welcome to the AICTE-sponsored STTP on Paradigm Shift in Assessment and Evaluation Practices for Engineering Graduates. I'm glad to see you all here, and I've got high hopes for what we can achieve while we are here. Today's first session is on the need for imparting ethics in engineering education. Participants can post their queries in the chat box, which will be addressed at the end of the session. I now invite Dr. Therese Yamuna Mahesh, course coordinator, to introduce the resource person, Sri Abraham Kurian, IPS.
Welcome, sir. Let me introduce you to the participants. Sir Abraham Kurian, IPS, started his career as a lecturer in the Humanities Department of IIT Madras. In 1969, Sir joined IPS and was allotted to the UP cadre. After an outstanding career in the Indian Police Service, he retired as Director General of Police in October 2005. Postings outside the state of UP included a 6-year term on deputation with the CBI, as General Manager in the State Financial Corporation, as Executive Director, Indian Telephones Industries for a period of 6 years, as Chairman and Managing Director, Housing Corporation for 2 years. Academic assignments included selection as National Research Fellow with the National Police Academy, Hyderabad. Sir was honored with the Indian Police Medal for meritorious services in 1990 and the Indian President's Police Medal for distinguished services in 2000. Sir further organized the setting up of St. Thomas Academy for Research and Training at Calicut in 2006 for providing early and intensive orientation for higher services, including civil services. Sir also has profound expertise in career guidance. We are proud to tell that he is a member of Amaljodi Governing Board. Today, let us hear him on the topic, the need for imparting ethics in engineering education. This topic is related to Program Outcome 8, Ethics, and also to Program Outcome 6, the Engineer and Society. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Yamuna ma'am, and good morning to everybody. As you would have already heard from the introduction, I have had very, frequent interaction with engineering firms, one after the other, because some of them have been in finance. But my active involvement with engineering staff, engineering faculty and students has been with the Amaljodi Institute, where I spent for happy years. Now I have shifted to another place. I still fondly cherish my memories of association with Amaljodi. Still continue with that as a member of the governing board. This is all about what I would like to say about my past in relation to the subject, the topic in discussion today. Since all my colleagues and all of you who are participating have been in active teaching, I would also like to mention very briefly that after retirement, I have been teaching students, of course, at various levels for the civil services, as also for careers, as Ms. Yamuna already told you. So based on my experience, I would like to share my thoughts with you, because this is a subject, as I would go, I'll explain to you how it is that I accepted the invitation to join this particular program, which is highly professional in the sense you are all professionals, and the subject is also professional and of some importance in the current scenario. I'll explain them one by one. Slide 1, I'll show you. You see, the first is a rather cynical observation, a bit disconcerting as you might find, that it is one of the least popular subjects of study and discussion. That is ethics, not strictly speaking engineering ethics, but ethics in general, because people believe that it consists only in theoretical formulations and not directly applicable to life in general, particularly in teaching profession. Of course, you would all know that teachers are expected to be role models in ethics for students, but then the cynicism involved is on account of the fact that in most places we are unable to lend credibility to our theoretical formulations by demonstrating to the student what ethical practices are being followed in our own private lives and in the lives of associations, in the life of organizations with which we may be associated. That is the number one issue. So ethical theories are considered sanctimonious. I have used the word sanctimonious for the reason that those who preach fail to profess the ethical, criteria or ethical considerations. It's not, universally applicable, but generally speaking, the ethical climate in the country, as also in education institutions, in organization, whether it's engineering, management, or any other profession, it is tending to be, I would call it a kind of, species, a highly threatened species, those who practice the ethical formulations in actual life would be considered as very rare, and those who are threatened with certain other consequences, as we will come to realize as we go ahead. Then, of course, the second reason is the duplicity of preachers and claimants to practice. This is again something very common, whether they are political leaders, whether they are priests, whether they are of any other organizations or even managements. Those who preach this very often happen to be found with, like gods with clay, with the feet of clay, as we say, those who are unable to really bring it about in their actual lives. And then, of course, finally, the thing I have written is diametrically supposed to be, I didn't mention the word supposed to be, but perceived to be diametrically opposite to science and technology, because science and technology, as all of you are from that profession, are based on empirical evidence and start from observable phenomena, and you formulate theories and then hypotheses and then form them. Whereas in the philosophical realm or in the ethical realm, you start off with inward looking and objective facts, which are subjective facts, which are peculiar or particular only to individuals and cannot be verified as in the matter of science. Next. Now, I have another reason for joining this particular program is that many of you would have obviously noticed it, but I wish to emphasize this fact before I proceed, that there is a very encouraging element in the new education policy that has been now published for public scrutiny, and which I find that there are, as our own ministers are in the habit of saying, there are green shoots observable in this particular realm, because new ideas have been incorporated, and I think they are very valuable. However much objections there might be on other aspects, but in regard to this, I think nobody will at least formally oppose these ideas. That is, for instance, the new educational policy professes to teach students the importance of doing what is right and to give logical framework for making ethical decisions. To my mind, this constitutes, or this, forms the essence of the subject of ethics, whether it applies to the engineering profession or to any other profession or any other career that students may have while they enter the class. And this is to be followed from primary level right up to the higher education levels. I have quoted the particular paragraph also. Then, society expects teachers or gurus to pass on their knowledge, skills, and ethics optimally to children. I don't know why they have used the term optimally, but I think they have done it in the best possible interest. Optimally means to the extent possible. I don't know why ethics have to be optimal. We will see it as we go along. Is it possible for ethics to be practiced fully or optimally? And then this next one is higher education to enable individuals to specialize areas of deep thought and ethical values across a range of disciplines. This I would call real green shoots in the sense, is a dream which I have been cherishing, that engineering education, in fact, I started teaching as Mr. Yamuna explained to you, in the humanities department at the IIT Chennai. Of course, it was IIT Madras in those days, way back in 1968-69. Then I realized that there is some degree of satisfaction in communicating with engineering students in matters relating to the humanities, whether they are the social sciences or whether the pure arts, fine arts, or whether it's any aspect of personality or development where students would have an opportunity to open their minds up to influences other than pure technical subjects. And I'm happy to note that the NEP does provide a space for this. Then, of course, the D part is undergraduate education to integrate the humanities and the arts with the STEM education subjects. So here again is a specific recommendation in the NEP that STEM education hopes to be enriched by the inculcation of these values, inculcation of these concerns to the students at the time when they are undergoing their graduation, as also higher education beyond graduation. And the other one is, one more observation I have incorporated here is value-based education to enable development of truth and righteous content. This again is a very significant observation, because value education is something which we have been mouthing very often and without really, being able to clothe it with much meaning and with form. But at the same time, it continues to remain an extremely vital part of education, because without values, where would our students go? Where are the teeming millions of, employed or unemployed graduates go? Because I believe, like many others do, that, there are certain questions to be asked about life. What is life worth? And what exactly does life mean to each one of us? Are we just a collection of atoms programmed to mature and to self-destruct after a particular time? Or are we in a position to understand that the human being is not merely a body, but also consists of a soul or an intelligence or a mind, whatever you may like to call it? So what kind of value would you attach to the human being? That is something which I think every student has to ask. And secondly, the students must be also asked to find out why we should be moral. Because apart from the fact that a value has to be attached to human life, it has also to be attached to the manner in which life has to be led. So that is why value-based education to me looks a very significant approach. It continues to remain so. And with this particular addition, to enable development of truth and righteous content. Here again, these are matters, which are which are susceptible to a great deal of observation and discussion, as also a kind of very many different perceptions, whether truth can be observed in the manner in which it is supposed to be, and whether righteous conduct, that is dharma in our Indian philosophy, to what extent are we in a position to implement in real life? Can we demonstrate it? As I said in the beginning, is it possible for us to demonstrate that righteous conduct is possible in every situation, in every organization, in every profession? Next, please. So I wish to also add this before I go further, that as all of you are aware, the differences are there basically between science and philosophy. At the same time, I would like, I think many of you may not be familiar with the fact that the origin of philosophy, from the point of view of incorporating ethics, of course, at that time, it was not ethics really, or in specifically, but the very fact that philosophy pertains to a realm of existence or realm of thought, which is beyond our observed phenomena. So the step from the sensuous to the non-sensuous step was taken earliest by an engineer himself, and he was Thales, born in the 6th century BC in Miletus, part of ancient Greece. He was known, very reputed for mathematical and astronomical learning. So it is not as though, philosophy originated from pure thinking. It originated absolutely from the observed phenomena, from materialism. So it has nothing to do with, it is as though it came down from heaven or it came down from some inspiration. It is inspiration, it is based on observed phenomena. And in fact, his fame rested on the fact that he predicted an eclipse of the sun of 585 BC, 600 years before Christian era. So we can imagine the kind of astronomical data. Of course, it is believed that Parmenides, Thales, learned all it from Egypt and other countries. That is possible, but whatever it is. But look at that, the other one, he was an innovative engineer. Of course, nobody would have called him an engineer in those days, but he did the engineering feat by diverting the river Halys for their army to cross it. This was another significant contribution that he made, and that is why he was known for mathematical as well as engineering skills. And of course, his principle, when we come to the principle of philosophical principle that he enunciated, it may look very simple. It may look very ordinary, very rudimentary. I mean, in the sense, nothing that, it is significant or profound about it. And even it looks a little funny that the first principle, the fundamental principle of all matter is water. Water, that is what Thales attempted to say. But even though it may sound rather, rudimentary or rather childish to say everything comes out of water, it would look like a myth. It's not a myth at all, because he had a very profound meaning behind that. And this also was the first recorded attempt to explain the universe on naturalistic and scientific principles without aid of myths and, anthropomorphic gods, which the Greeks were fond of going after. So this was the first baby step, as we would say, towards the glimpses into the realm of the unknown, beyond what is perceived, and to areas which had been hitherto unknown to the human mind. So this was taken by an engineer. So that is why I thought I'll mention him first. Even though he had no ethical principle involved in this, he was still operating. He was a materialist kind of philosopher, but even so, he was the first one to take the step from materialism into a realm which was unknown to it till then. Next one. Now, how did philosophy proceed from this material base? This I would very briefly explain so that we have an idea how the whole idea of ethics developed for the Greeks. Now, Thales was the one who did this. Now, from progression, from materialism, we find that there are quite a number of others. I'll only like to mention a few because I'm not a student of philosophy, but it's out of my, because I like to think about it, speak about it. So from my reading, I understand there is a number of subsequent philosophers seeking the single ultimate principle behind multiplicity of the world. What prompted the Greeks? They must have been really original thinkers, profound in their observation and inquisitive in their mind, intellectually stimulated to look into the phenomena, observed phenomena. It is multiplicity of phenomena. Wherever you look, there are innumerable types of phenomena occurring around you, articles, artifacts, also nature's, the huge diversity, the complexity of life around you. So it prompted them to feel, how did all this originate? Is there some single principle which might have formed the nucleus or the origin or the starting, the base, the point at which all the origins or the creation, so they have no notion of creation, but how did they originate? Where did they, what is the source? So that single ultimate principle was what they were seeking behind the multiplicity of the world. Is there any single element which can explain this multiple manifestations? So people like Anaximander, he said, it's indefinite matter like air or whatever it is. Anaximander said it is air specifically. Pythagoras, of course, with whom you would all be familiar, he said it consists in numbers. And Heracletus is another very important figure. He said it is out of fire. Because, all this had some observable reasons. Because water you will find everywhere. And water is there present in each cell. Even today we know that without water being present, nothing can live. And like fire again extinguishes something, but then out of that, again new products come. And Democritus is one who brought about this important knowledge at that point of time about particles. They said the ultimate object or the ultimate, single ultimate principle consists of atoms. And today we prove ourselves, that the theory gets proved in subsequent investigations. And now there is absolutely no doubt about the fact that the smallest particles are the base of existence. So the procedure is even then, even to that particular point of view, it is all from matter and how nature as observable phenomena can be understood, whether it emanates from one single participle or whether it manifests itself in multiplicity of observed phenomena, or what exactly is it? Numbers? Is it atoms? Is it indefinite matter? Is it air or water or fire? All these speculations were going on in their minds. And for the first time, Anaxagoras, whose name I have not mentioned here, his name doesn't find mention here, is the one who propounded that it is something else, it is something beyond even matter, that we had to go beyond it. But that particular idea was developed and formulated into a principle by the leading thinker of the new school called the Eleatic school. So Parmenides is the leader of that particular school of thought, which gave rise to the movement from sensationism to semi-sensuous idealism. So he is a major departure, because without understanding Parmenides, in fact, we would not be able to come to realize where ethics originated. That is why took you through this particular progression, even though they all started from the naturalistic and the phenomena observed from physical objects, they progress towards an idea that there is something beyond what we observe in nature. That is, from sense perceptions, we are going beyond to semi-sensuous, and it becomes idealism as observed by the Eleatics. Elia is again a place, and those who work there, those who taught there are known as the Eleatic school, and Parmenides was the major leader of this. So how do they proceed? Search for the eternal from change and mutation. To them, the whole question was not merely the fact that things are observable as multiple or phenomena are different, but the fact that there is constant, there is a very disturbing trend of change and mutation. Things change, bodies change, lives change, nature around you changes. So Parmenides believed that apart from Thales, who designated water the one reality and Pythagoras the number, Parmenides propounded the first principle of things as being. In fact, what he was looking for was that there should be some kind of some kind of firm foundation for our beliefs. There has to be something which doesn't move, or which doesn't change, or which doesn't undergo decay. Like, for instance, the body decays and death comes, and then thereafter we do not know what happens. So similarly, he believed we have to look for something which may not be observable, but then like others, like Thales and Pythagoras and all that. But Parmenides wanted to propounded this theory that we can find fixity or permanence and values only if we step out of the sensuous objects and we go into something beyond the observed phenomena. And this he termed as being. Of course, it's a Greek word, but then in translation, it can only be called as being. And he distinguished being from becoming or not being. Not being is the same as becoming. Being and becoming were two formulations which he wanted to distinguish between so that some permanence could be attached to one aspect of reality, even though the other aspect of reality would continue to change. And this forms the basis also of our entire belief or thought or our philosophy of ethics or any other kind of philosophy. Later on, of course, they had no notion at that particular time, but Parmenides can be credited with this particular aspect of emerging into a new era of thinking in terms of being and non-being. Next, please. Now, the important part is, apart from the fact that, the procedure or the progress from reality, from the observable phenomena, change in phenomena, to something permanent has to go through our mind, we must also realize that there has to be some truth, permanent truth, which doesn't change. So that is what he was trying to find out, that we will have to approach this permanency not through observable phenomena, but only by reason. So he is the first person that to distinguish between on the one hand, perception, and on the other, reason, or rather the senses and the reason. By we proceed along senses by observable phenomena. And also he went one step further to say that the observable phenomena should be seen as only illusion. It is only an illusion. And whereas permanent truth, we can arrive at only by reason. This was, I think, one of the most important things for philosophy, and all the values that we associate philosophy with, and particularly ethics, we will arrive at it by deduction after this particular proposition. Then, of course, we come to a crisis in this particular, progression. Next, please. Next slide. Earlier one, moral relativism. Moral relativism. I wanted to show you, I think there is some problem over the particular slide. I wanted to speak about the crisis which is brought about by this two propositions. That is, on the one hand, Heracletus and others say they keep on changing constantly. On the other, Parmenides wanted to establish that there is only one permanent truth, which is being, and becoming is an illusion. So this particular opposition or conflict between two schools of philosophy came to be a matter of discussion and public, preaching about the value of things, value of, beliefs, value of what you call our systems of thought. And this was actually being, going round in discussions called what we call today sophistry, comes from the word of sophist. The sophists were roaming teachers who would go around and ask questions and then find out answers. And then they were eloquent people, so they could move people. They could also move, explain things, and they could gather people together. So they believed that the lack of permanence, or the conflict between permanence in truth or permanence in reality, and the phenomena, the lack of permanence in phenomena, it is an unending kind of debate. What is the use of this kind of debate when philosophy is unable to explain anything logically, or this particular brand of argument? It doesn't lead us to anything. So let us forget about all this. So we will, the sophist said, for us, what is more important is that we need to go by what we understand, what we feel. And their philosophy consisted in one single thing, that is that morality, or our feeling of right and wrong, whatever we speak about our attitude towards others, and whatever we think about our success in life, whatever we think about our objective in life, all should be based on our experience and our perception, as well as our enjoyment of life. So the sophist teaching taught a kind of moral relativism. Moral relativism is one where people believe that there is no permanent, because just like this flux that happens, observable phenomena, they believe that even in the moral plane, there is no permanent value or permanent truth. Morality or ethics, of course, at that time, ethics had not come into use even in the real sense, but moral right and wrong, that particular understanding should emerge according to the perception of each individual. That is, morality should be absolutely subjective, depending on individual perception. It has nothing to do with any permanent value, nor is it related to any kind of reality which is beyond us. So all belief in truth as an objective reality and faith and the moral law was destroyed by sophists at that particular time. So sophists interpreted this debate to mean that all moral and political principles are also relative to the group which believes in them. So what is the conclusion of such a proposition? That no one is obliged to obey the law, because they said laws serve only to protect the interest of the powerful party. So sophists, by deduction, they are going beyond what Parmenides or others had thought. Because of the conflict between Parmenides and Heracletus, they believe that there is no point, because everything is in flux and nothing is permanent. So let us go by this particular more practical consideration that morality needs to be only known for in a relative sense. That is, anything that appears sensible to you, workable to you, pleasurable to you, that should constitute what is morality and what is proper and what is in everybody's right to practice. So the final conclusion they drew is that hence only a fool obeys the law if it is against his own advantage. So he says, if you follow the law, it is because a law is meant only for the benefit of the powerful and the influential or the rich or whatever. And those who obey the law and would be against his own interests is a fool, because there's nothing to be gained by obeying the law. So it destroys the foundation of law and morality. So what I would like you to sort of appreciate is that the progression from the physical reality to a reality beyond the senses it came to a clash, and then this was made use of by the sophists, and probably that is why I think even today we use the term sophistry in a slightly derogatory manner, because you can argue your way out of saying that there is no need of the law, there is no need of any morality to be practiced, and there can be no universal law. And universal law or morality is a myth. And what matters is individual decision, individual experience, and individual judgment. So it's a purely subjective kind of morality, which you can imagine what is the kind of the world we will be facing if there was any kind of moral law, or if it was left to individuals to decide what would be morally right and morally wrong. So that is the great crisis situation in which, like today in many countries, we are finding crisis situations emerging out of either political reasons or social reasons or even moral reasons. So in those times, we imagine that somebody comes up, we say in Hindu philosophy, say yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. So the same thing applies wherever there is some decline in thinking or in understanding or in our value systems, some force or some element or some influence emerges which corrects it. So this is the kind of scenario in which the two great philosophers, of course, you can call them the three sons, the Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. These are the three who brought about, the strong, placed philosophy on a strong foundation for all ages to come, not merely for Greece or for any Europe or any place, or for every human being. Indian philosophy also equally strong. It is not that we didn't have it, but formulated in this way, this was probably the first occasion, even though we had the Dharma Shastras, but still the manner in which they went into details is something which is unsurpassed according to most observers. So the next place, next. So moral relativism, no, you have to go back to 6. I think my slides have gone upside down. Go back, go back. You have to kind to two kinds of reality. Two kinds of reality is the slide I wanted to see.
Yes, sir. I'm putting that.
Sorry, I can't manage it from here. That is why I'm depending on somebody else to do the screen sharing. Please bear with me. Two kinds of reality. Now, this is what, the great philosopher Plato, I have cut it down because it's not much time. And in any case, we have to come to the real topic, which is ethics. But then two kinds of reality is what the philosophy of Plato introduces to the world, to the world of philosophy. So there, in very brief terms, Plato wanted to reconcile the two conflicting theories so that, there is an end to this kind of moral relativism that had been, brought in by the Sophists. So he said, both Heracletus and Parmenides are right to some extent. He said, the mistake that Sophists made arises out of the fact that they were unable to see that there are two kinds of reality, a dualistic kind of reality. That is, there is this particular thing, all trees and all animals and all human beings, all the earth, everything that you see before them is what we observe by our senses. So that is observable phenomena, which is easily, readily understood. But he said, there is also another kind of reality which consists of concepts or ideas or forms. These are the names he used, because he says these are the difference between the two is that you can arrive at the observable phenomena by the use of the senses, but you can observe at the other kind of reality of concepts, ideas, or forms only through use of reason. And what is the speciality of this particular kind of reality? That they are immanent or everywhere, and they are permanent. They don't undergo any change, and they are not amenable to any kind of other influences. They are immanent and they are absolutely self-regulating. That kind of reality is what Parmenides was thinking. Whereas Heracletus was always concerned about the moving, the flux, the quickly moving and the changing and the completely unstable kind of phenomena. He said he is right because he was only concerned with what he could see with the eyes, whereas Parmenides could observe that there is a being, which has no shape, which has no beginning, which has no end, and which has no substance other than itself. So that kind of an object, Plato called it the concept or the idea or the form, which are objects of thought like the idea of a triangle. Idea of a triangle never changes. Whether the triangle is thought of in Greece or in India or in Kerala or in America, the triangle remains the same. Or beauty, the essence of beauty as understood anywhere is understood in more or less the same. Now, the idea of a triangle is universally true, of unchanging and immutable. So he said, the inner reality, the ultimate reality, the objective reality which you are unable to see with your eyes, but you can arrive at by a process of thinking, by a process of reasoning, is that which is, and because he explained it in various ways. For instance, the idea of a table. He said, a table exists in wood, but even if there is no wood available, there is no table available before you, the idea of the table can be there. So the universal principle or the universal theory is something which had its beginning, and this particular thing he used in order to promote the fact that there is a reality, objective reality, which has to be sought in pursuing this kind of value to life. Otherwise, morality will have no value, life will have value, everything will come to a certain end without any meaning. So then of course he introduced that the next place, the Allegory of the Cave. This again is a very elaborate one, but just to explain how he was trying to bring about this fact. In fact, you might be wondering why I should speak about the Allegory of the Cave in regard to ethics. My idea is only this, that unless a student is able to understand that there is a branch of philosophy like ethics, which seeks to establish that we have to see a reality beyond what we see with our eyes. That basic idea, if it is understood, if it is internalized, I think that will help in explaining the relevance of ethics for day-to-day life and its application. So Allegory of the Cave, in that context only I'll mention the Allegory of Cave. It is a very, many of you would be familiar, but I would assume that it is, useful for clarifying my concept of how ethics can be made meaningful and useful for our students. That's the main intention. So Allegory of the Cave means Plato gave out this to say that imagine a cave in which certain people are chained with their faces, they're facing one wall in front of them. They cannot turn. They are chained hand and feet without any ability. They can only see things which are on the wall across them, which they are facing. Behind is the cave and the entrance to the cave and all. They cannot see anything other than this particular. And behind them, there is a raised wall and there is a fire. And on the raised wall, some images are walking across from one end to the other. They are, of course, puppets of trees and animals and men and all moving across it. And the fire is burning behind it. So what these chained persons can see across on the wall across them is only the shadows created by the fire, by the light of the fire. And they are constantly staying, let's assume for the sake of argument, that from birth to death they are chained like this, and they are unable to see anything other than shadows moving across this wall. So their life is confined to this, and their understanding of reality, of life or reality, is all that what they see on the wall against them. Whereas the fire behind them, they are unable to see, they see only this. Now assume that a teacher or anybody who is concerned with them, or somebody sympathetic to them, comes and takes out one person and takes him out, tries to move him and take him out there, and tries to the cave, the mouth of the cave. So he would be initially struggling, but he would be trying to persuade them and to show him that, have a look. So he, with great difficulty, he would be persuaded to go. And the moment he reaches the mouth of the cave, he is absolutely scared, because for the first time in his life, he is seeing light. And he is also, after his eyes are used to light, after struggling a lot, he is able to see actual things moving, animals or men or whatever, moving things. And then he sees the sun. The sun blinds him totally, because he is being exposed to the sun for the first time. So then he comes back, or he is persuaded to go back and tell the others that you also come, what you have seeing is only shadows, but the real world is outside. You come and have a look. But Plato, I believe, somewhere, I think he at least means to say that such a person even would be, the others would assault him if we were to say that, something like that. Anyway, what Plato means by this particular allegory is to show that what we are seeing about us, around us, is all illusory. They're all shadows. Shadows of what? What is the objective reality? These are all shadows. What would be the reality? The reality, he says, can be shown to us only by reason, because the sun representing the illuminating one, the being that Parmenides taught, it could be the same thing as objective reality is like a sun, which shows us what exactly is the truth, or what exactly is beauty, what exactly, because like the triangle, what the reality of triangle is the same, and reality of beauty, for instance, the same, let us assume. So that kind of reality can be made and understood to a person only if he's trained in the application of reason. And that application of the reason is the educational part of it. So to my mind, this kind of, this allegory tells us that it's an educational process, that there has to be an ascent of the student to proceed from the area of darkness in which we are all chained, being tied to material things, material pleasures, only material considerations. And we have to be shown that there is another higher kind of reality, more superior, more permanent, immutable reality, where ultimately you have to reach. And this passage, this ascent, is to be through the process of reasoning and education, which is true vision. You will be led to true reality only if we are able to pursue this path from darkness of corruption to vision of truth, the vision of truth and of all qualities that we aspire to inculcate in our students. For instance, honesty, integrity, or consideration for others, compassion, empathy. All these qualities could be there only if we have a vision of something beyond what we see. Otherwise, you can always be competing, you can only be fighting, you can only be downplaying others, we can only be exploiting others. Only if we have got certain qualities mind which are beyond what is perceptible qualities or the comforts of life. If we are concerned with certain other superior, higher kinds of life, that is definitely there, because that is an objective reality, whereas we are led generally by the subjective vision, or what we call the phenomena that we observe and the experiences that we have and the pleasures that we derive from all our actions. All that is confining us to this cave, which Plato believed in the allegory. Next, please. So the ethical conclusions is from here we proceed to the emergence of ethical beliefs. Say, for instance, Sophist teaching as truth is sense perception, therefore subject dependent individual perception, and all belief in truth as an objective reality. And one moment. Actually, I cannot see the whole screen. That is why I'm required to read from another text. Yeah, Sophist teaching that truth is sense perception and therefore subjective depending on individual perception. It was destructive of morality, of social stability, of any kind of collective community, meaning even individuals. Because if we are moral relativism, that can lead the world into only chaos. And all belief in truth as an objective reality and faith in the objectivity of the moral law destroyed by Sophist teaching. That was what they had done. And Plato refuted the argument that knowledge is perception and knowledge is true. He refuted the argument that knowledge is perception and proved or attempted to prove that knowledge can only be through these concepts. That if you emerge from the shadow or if you emerge from the darkness of the cave and being released from the confinement with the shadows, then only we will be able to see the reality of truth and reality of all other objective quality of that which concerns our ethical living or the values of ethics. Next, please. Ethical conclusions. So these are the conclusions, or rather the ethical concepts that emerge out of this particular allegory, that justice, truth, virtue, duty are objective, are permanent realities. I suppose this is easily understood. I don't think it needs to be elaborated upon, but still I would like to mention that if this had been firmly implanted in the minds of people, can you imagine that there would be injustice, or there would be falsehood, or there would be evil? It is very, very, it is quite likely that the absence of this particular, conviction about objective reality and objective truths is what I think is driving the world into all kinds of serious situations of conflict, of animosity, social disharmony, or what you call oppression. All kinds of evil in the world can be on account of the inability or the unwillingness to accept this. Of course, there's a great deal of argument whether the awareness itself is capable of motivating you. Certainly not. That is true. That was also the kind of disagreement between Plato and Socrates, into which I do not like to go now. But we will deal with that, because when we take up various kinds of ethical, virtues, there are people, who say that mere knowledge. Plato believed that knowledge would, because his argument was, if a person knows something is good for him, he would not like to do something else. So if he is given the correct perception that these are the values which are good for you, then he will not deviate from that path. That was the kind of rather, shall we say, not very practical way of looking at things, because he himself had, what you call defined the tripartite soul. The soul consists of three parts. One, of course, is the part, which is governed by idealism or this kind of value perception. The other is the spirit to conquer the adventurous and the aggressive and the ambitious self. And thirdly, the base, which is composed of passions and emotions. So when he himself had realized that passions are capable of driving a man astray, and in fact, I think he had also given this example of passions like a cart being driven by horses, and the reason has to guide them, otherwise they'll lead you wherever they want. So with all this, the Platonic theory suffers from the fact that this kind of knowledge alone may not be able to improve the world. But without that knowledge, what will happen? That is how I would like to put it. Had this knowledge been not present, is it conceivable, or does it stand to reason that every person would be endowed with this inner conviction that morality, virtue require that justice should be observed, truth should be there? So whether this is part of, like for instance, American Declaration of Independence says all men are endowed with certain inalienable rights. But then are there inalienable qualities also in people, or convictions also in people? There are, definitely, because otherwise humanitarianism or humanism, human values would not be there. Every person is endowed with certain degree of awareness of what is right or wrong. Otherwise, we would not call it conscience. There is, at least all religions, I believe, regardless of where the religions originated, that there is something called innate perception of what is right and what is wrong. But even so, if young people are made to believe that there are higher, things to be achieved by pursuing the reason or the path of reason, rather than the path of only of enjoyment or of pleasure seeking, then I think there can be a great deal of change, and there can be some, of course, there are any number of ways in which it can be explained. We will go to that when we go to the next session in regard to the explanation of each of these. So the cultivation of the intellect to pursue reason removes such obstructions, because sense perceptions of the external world prevent people from observing this truth. That is actually what is happening, because our consideration in regard to our ambition, our consideration in regard to our comfort, our considerations in regard to success in life, all these are things which motivate us to adopt ways which are ethically not proper. But if these truths can be shown to lead us to higher satisfaction, a nobler perception of life, probably at a young age, when we are able to motivate them, when we are able to show them that there are certain greater things, greater achievements to be made in life, rather than mere success in terms of physical objects or physical attainments, then maybe we are in a position. That is why I would like to call it cultivation of the intellect to pursue reason removes these obstructions, those temptations which lead us astray, and which provoke us, or rather instigate us, incite us to adopt policies and actions that may be inherently evil, and not only evil by themselves, but also causing a great deal of harm to others. If these could be avoided, then life would be far better. So education should aim at the cultivation of reason. So this reason, I have put it in the capital, because that's the kind of reason that we are speaking about. This reason which allows us to see objective reality. That is, there is a reality. Of course, the kind of reality that Plato propounded may not be strictly, because we call it Platonic ideas in any case. Whenever we say it is Platonic, that means it's impractical. It's not that impractical. But when we observe the manner in which the world moves, and observe the manner in which evil very often, overwhelms people, and in the, in countries, nations, races, all of them are subject to this kind of oppressive eras, and where we find that people are driven only by material benefits and people are driven only by material success. So in regard to when we come to such education also guides ethical conduct. When we come to education of this particular type, the chances are more, to my mind, because I'm not saying that it has got more, it does more, it offers more chances of falling into this because it's a profession or because it's a material thing. Whatever it is, if a profession or a career that prevents students or young people from reading, for instance, I would say, it can at least contribute to forgetting about some of these values, because not everybody would be inclined to read. It is, I suppose, the duty of every teacher to provide the opportunity and the motivation for youngsters to read, particularly if they happen to be concerned with pursuing professions which require all time, which require full-time attention, and which require full-time concern with achieving certain results within certain periods, like for instance, the management theory of efficiency. How much can you accomplish by how little, how limited resources? That efficiency is defined by that. But whereas effectiveness is another term, which says whether it is a kind of pursuit which is acceptable, which is reasonable. So that efficiency, driving towards efficiency, is something which I think is primarily, a factor which concerns engineering education. I'm not saying that engineering education is any, inferior to other types in terms of moral convictions. It's not that. But because we are concerned with the results in limited time and limited resources, there is a tendency for us to forget about the other aspects of having to look into, say, reading and taking part in activities which promote the pursuits which are laying beyond the physical achievements. So I think the best way in that kind of an education, in engineering education, is the way in which you are able to promote the understanding, or promote, or the cultivate a taste for, I think, which is not easy at all. I can assure you that, because I think I may not be able to pursue, have been persuasive at all in my own way of presenting it. But over a period of time, if you are able to read and understand and explain and demonstrate it in day-to-day, realistic applications to life in the profession, in the career, I think it will be far more educative, far more healthy, and I think far more capable of promoting this kind of a value education which is propounded by the national education policy. I think with this we will have a break for about 10 minutes. We'll reassemble if it's agreeable to you by around 11:10. Thank you.
Okay, dear participants, you can resume back after 10 minutes. So we'll come back at 11:15.
వాడికే కూడా చేసుకోవాలి ఆడ పొలిటికల్ లీడర్ ఈ తలకాయ వీడికి మార్కుడు నేను చదవనాడికి రోడ్డు చేస్తే అనిపించుకోవాల్సిన అవసరం గవర్నమెంట్ దాదాపు
So shall we start the session?
Can we start now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I hope all have joined. I'll start off in any case. I'll continue with the theme for a little while before I switch on to the actual practices in our engineering profession. Of course, you're all teachers, but even so, application of this particular idea of imparting value education or ethical education to students must also enable us to prepare them to face problems in regard to ethical situations, ethical challenges, moral challenges in life. So from that point of view, I'll come to that later. But first, let me finish this, the earlier part, few things which need to be borne in mind while we speak about the aspects of ethical considerations that we are likely to deal with in professions. You see, the first, and the most important part, of course, is our idea of right and wrong and about our motivation about actions. These are the two core elements of ethical considerations. Number one, of course, is in relation to the fact whether we have a clear understanding of what is right and what is wrong in regard to each situation. All depends upon our individual perception, our training, our environment, our the circumstances under which we are functioning, and also, in a number of others. For instance, about the manner in which the particular thing has been presented to us in communication. All that can form the environment. But the other more important part in regard to ethics is the motivation. What exactly moves us? What exactly what exactly encourages us or demotivates us or de-incentivizes us, whatever it is. What exactly is the motivation in regard to actions or ideas that we put into action? So are we led by a consideration? Because as I spoke earlier, as regards some moral relativism, each person can decide for himself and herself what is right or what is wrong. But that kind of a situation, it is only hypothetical. It doesn't exist in reality. But still, we can bear in mind a situation where such a complexity could have arisen without any ethical basis. But confining ourselves to the fact that at the time of taking action or responding to a situation, what is the value that we have in mind? What is the objective we have in mind? What is the consequence we have in mind? What is the motivation we have in mind? So it is called the consequentialist theory of motivation or of ethics, where everything is guided by a simple consideration. What will be the nature of the consequence? Whether it contributes to happiness or unhappiness or evil or whatever it is, what is the motivation behind this? Is it something which the motivation is that it should accrue something profitable to me? Or am I motivated by the fact that it will do some good to others? Or am I motivated by nothing special except that we are mechanically perform some function without consideration of the consequence? And it can be dangerous sometimes, it can be harmless sometimes. But then do we have, constantly whenever we act, we are moved by thoughts and we are moved by emotions. So are we guided by certain thoughts which lead us to creating a situation in which other people might gain or other people might lose, or whether it will cause and benefit to me or benefit to others? For instance, I can explain it, of course, in legal language. For instance, since I'm a police officer, I can explain this by citing one particular clause from a law in the Prevention of Corruption Act, which is, now being talked about because it has been diluted in my view, but when I was in the CBI and all, we were dealing with it. I'm just giving an example of the section 13(1)(d) of the Prevention of Corruption Act says, if a public servant commits an act or enters into a kind of transaction in which either an illegal gain is comes to himself or herself, or an illegal, loss is caused to the public or the public interest, or an illegal gain is caused to the other party or a private party, so that constitutes criminal misconduct. I mean, these are all laws and regulations which derive out of the sense of right and wrong. So consequentialist theory arises from, one thing is about distinguishing between right and wrong, but more popularly it is known for the utilitarianism, because it is shown today as a leading principle of the market economy that if your action is likely to cause or end or result in a maximum happiness to the maximum number, that is justified. This was Bentham and Stuart Mill. These are the two people who propose this. In fact, there is a great deal of writing, a lot of literature on the consequentialist theory. And today, if you look at economic policy, if you look at social policy, much of it, I would not say all, much of it is guided by the fact whether it contributes happiness or contributes to the welfare of the maximum welfare or the maximum number. So what is lacking there or what is not said, this is what is said. What is unsaid, there is a certain degree of, what shall we say, indifference to the way in which it might affect the fewer number. I would not like to use the term minority because minority immediately raises, other associations. I don't have that in mind. I'm only saying the smaller number may result in a great deal of suffering to some. But the leading principle is that it should result in maximum comfort, maximum happiness to the maximum number. That is what Jeremy Bentham and all propounded. And to my mind, and I think to all common understanding, this is probably one important consideration determining the market economy of today. Because, for instance, let's assume that, say, a number of what you call disputes that are taking place in India in regard to setting up of factories, whether it is in Hyderabad, like Sterlite factory, or whether it is somewhere else. A number of like Niyamagiri Hills in Odisha, or any number of them anywhere in India, or disasters have taken place in Bhopal. Disaster we can think about later on. We will deal with that. But think of the particular concern or the particular dispute or the conflict between the needs of development and the needs of environment, for instance. So when you take a decision or when you consider the ethical theory in mind, bearing in ethical theory in mind, what sort of principle should guide you? Should it be the consequentialist theory, which propounds that if it contributes to the maximum welfare, to the maximum number, shouldn't it be adopted regardless of what it does to the environment, for instance? It is a silent party in the whole process. Environment cannot protest, the forest cannot protest. Niyamagiri Hills, for instance, Orissa, where hundreds of tribals were to be replaced by that South Korean company. Now that was closed down for some time, it was reopened. I mean, all kinds of controversies took place, or Sterlite or any other kind, wherever, there is great danger of, there is a clearly perceptible danger possible to the population by setting up a chemical factory in close vicinity to public and of polluting rivers and, wells and other sources of water. So, But at the same time, that in fact, I think it did come up in an article which I was reading the other day, maybe India Today or somewhere, I forget, a big article which discussed the loss of livelihoods for virtually thousands, I believe, in who had been employed in Sterlite when it got closed down. So what is the consequence of this? Apparently, when it is running smoothly and producing whatever it was making, and when it was providing employment and livelihood for hundreds of families and men and women working there, it was a positive outcome. There is no doubt about that. So maximum welfare it was causing, not only to the people who had been employed, but also around, the entire area would have been developed substantially, and people would have derived a great deal of benefit out of the operations of this because of the investment that had taken place. So maximum welfare to the maximum number, because it is not in terms of number counting one or two, but then the concept is, I suppose, clear enough. So this is one important concept that is being debated in regard to ethical theories. And opposite to that is the deontological theory. Deontological is virtually not, I would not call it, or more or less opposite, but deontology means the duty, what the duty prescribes. What is your duty? Should we go by the consequences, whatever it is, or should we go merely by your duty as a particular person in charge of that or responsible for that operation? It could be individual, it could be a group, it could be, an organization, it could be anything. Say, take the same example of Sterlite. Well, if the particular concerned, or in Kerala, of course, many of you may not be from Kerala, but Keralite participants would readily understand the construction of multi-story apartments near the water source. It had to be demolished recently by Supreme Court order. So similarly, in deontological theory, this particular conflict of what you call duty, what the duty prescribes, what the duty mandates, whether you are a public servant or in any other matter, even in an individual day-to-day lives, what does your duty prescribe? The duty of a doctor, for instance, in regard to, say, cases of death. So what you call very what you call terminal cases of cancer. What is some people might be interested or might be very keen that a person should not be allowed to die. Should not be allowed to die suffering, rather than that doctors should assist in what you call mercy killing, as we call it. So deontology, what is your duty as a doctor at that particular moment? So in any number of situations in life you can think about where this particular prescription or particular conflict arises, whether we should follow the consequence of an action or whether you should go merely by what duty prescribes or what your code of conduct prescribes. So whatever immediate, what you call commitment compel you to do. So these are two conflicting theories. Then virtue theory, doing virtuous action for its own sake. So here again is another kind of example, very sympathetic action, to ameliorate poverty or ameliorate sickness or whatever it is. It is done not for any consequence or not, nor is it because it's a duty, but we believe that it is virtuous to do so. That another kind of situation in which ethical theories operate. So there are many others, like egoism is there, hedonism is there. I'm not going into all that. They are not particularly relevant to our context, even though they do occur. But then I think we will confine ourselves to these 2 or 3 theories, which we can debate later on. These are only ideas which we can continue to go along with. Now I'll take up the second part of the session. This was the concluding part of the earlier session. The second part is in relation to what I would call the professional code of conduct or professional ethics of an engineer. So that I will, because I suppose this is known to most of you, but I think I thought I'll include this because to my mind, it is something which needs to be kept in mind while we train students. So I hope you will find it worthwhile to pay some attention, I mean, some thought to it as the days go by, because we do not know in what manner these things are going to develop in the days to come. Now, one moment, not able to take out this. Yeah. So I start by saying engineering services are dedicated to the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. This is well understood. I don't think it needs any elaboration. But if you consider what has been happening in India, I mentioned to you the Kerala case where building an entire apartment, 2 apartments, I believe, had been demolished in Kochi, or another bridge is getting demolished now. I think the process is going on. So these are, designed by engineers and executed also probably by engineers. I do not know. I have not gone into the merits of the issue. But the fact remains that these engineering services dedicated to the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. So all are equally important. And public health, to my mind at least, it takes a priority over everything else because of the manner in which the COVID, pandemic is raging all across the world. So I think public health should assume or should occupy a high priority. Safety, of course, is understood. Without safety, there is no engineering work or engineering design or engineering, execution of an engineering project is worthwhile. And ethics is integral to the practice. The second part I have mentioned is ethics is integral to the practice of engineering and a part of engineering problem solving. Because all of you are not only, of course, as teachers, you may not be doing it, but some at least would be, I'm sure, guiding research and entrepreneurship and all that. So in the problem solving, which is very, very important, a part of your occupation and of your students, when you engage in doing that, ethics has to be an integral part, because it has to be done in a manner that it doesn't either take away somebody's right or it doesn't, cause some harm to others. And ethics, I think, should dictate every action or every possible step that you take in any practice of engineering profession. Then safety and avoidance of harm are principles that guide engineering standards. So what standards should you observe, should you adhere to while leading or while giving, leadership to this? And professional and personal requirements are another one which I would deal with. And ethical responsibility. What is ethical responsibility? I'll try to rush through because it's only half an hour left. Professional ethics, I'm speaking about professional ethics first. So these are matters very well known to you. There's nothing that I can teach you about because I'm not an engineer. But still, just for the sake of you're appreciating the need for sensitizing your students, I'm just including these. Professional ethics, relationship between engineers and others who are part of an organization. You see, I speak not only as a teacher, of course, I've been teaching since I retired, teaching purely out of my own love of teaching, not because of any other interest. So, but I have been a police officer enforcing the law for 32 years. I spent 33 years, I think, in the IPS, and that in a problematic place like UP. You all know what UP is about. I don't need to tell you. So, and I have been associated with 2 engineering firms, at least, the ITI, from IIT, Indian Telephone Industries, and I was CMD of corporation. So in both respects, I have dealt with quite a number of situations where the relationships have figured as a very important matter in regard to quality, in regard to, to speed, in regard to cost, in regard to anything else that you can think about in whether it's construction or in any other operation in regard relating to your skill as an engineer. Then relationship with organization and with public authority, that is another thing which I have again noticed, that very often you find that, not very often, at least some organizations, the tendency to cut corners and to adopt short-term methods to achieve results, and in violation of or in disregard to public authority or in regard to public laws and against the public interest. Contacts with media and other interested agents. This is another thing which is very common to most of us. Now we are aware about social media, how it does a great deal of good, but at the same time, it can always prove to be a deleterious element. But then if an engineer, a professional is not careful with that kind of a media exposure, it can bring about a great deal of damage to the organization, to the individual, or to the public interest in general. Maintenance of confidentiality again is something which is very crucial as a matter of professional ethics, because without that degree of because intellectual property rights, for instance, IPR is another area, or the quality of product, or the cost factor. All these are matters which are in exclusive knowledge of the finance professionals as well as the engineers and others who deal with it. But this is part of the professional ethics I thought I must mention. Then I have concluded that paragraph by saying the primacy of public interest. To my mind, that is what has guided me, honestly speaking, because I have never had any kind of ethical dilemmas. Of course, professionally, ethical challenges there, but I was never faced with the dilemma. I knew what to do. I considered public interest the prime interest. I just did it and suffered for it often, because I have no time to go into my personal experience. But I can tell you this, you can ask anybody in the UP IPS cadre. They know me for my inflexible attitude towards maintenance of the public interest. That has what I have been doing. And ever since retirement also, I teach my students, the civil service students, wherever I go, I teach them this. Your prime duty is to the Constitution and to the public interest, nothing beyond. And if there is a conflict, then you stand by the public interest. And if you may have to suffer very often. I have suffered quite a number of times. I can tell you in 33 years, I have been transferred 26 times. You can imagine how much hardship it would have cost to the family and to the finances and to the discomfort and all that. All that I'm just mentioning is a briefly, but many other things which I can quote, but there is no time or occasion for me to speak about my experience. But I can tell you this with total honesty and total conviction that I never had any occasion even to doubt whether I must proceed in this particular direction, if it, by any chance, if it militated against the public interest. Then personal ethics, again, a matter which I suppose every student must be made aware of. We are talking about personal ethics as a subject, but integrity and loyalty are crucial to any organization. Professional commitment above personal interest. This again is something which I have mentioned about the primacy of covers this. So nothing should be allowed to take precedence over what concerns the professional commitment. You have a commitment to every duty, so personal element should never be allowed to go over that. Resolving issues of conflict of interest. That is another one which has been receiving a lot of attention. Well, you have heard of Rajat Gupta's case and all that insider training. He is still, I think he was in jail for quite a long time. Any number of cases. I have no time to recount all that, where a personal element, personal interest was there. And even when, even as I was in the telephone industries, I was executive director and then become director then. So there again, the vendor committee, I always used to tell them, vendor rating committee used to be there. I said, if there is any remote connection between you and a particular transaction, you recluse yourself. You just take yourself away. Be honest with, like I was in the UPSC board for 2-3 years. So the interview, you have to declare your interest in any candidate before you, start the interview. You have to declare that none of these people, 12 people in the forenoon, 12 in the afternoon, that's how we used to do. None of them is even remotely connected to you in any manner. If you are, then recuse yourself. Recuse. Just be away from that. Then willingness to obtain technical advice when in doubt. This I found from my own experience that there are, unfortunately, people who, because of their considerations or their personal, image of themselves, they don't think it worthwhile to consult anybody. Go ahead and do it and get into problems. Then code of ethics, I think everybody knows it should be well laid out and any organization should have it. accepting responsibility for safety and health of clients and people at large, adherence to areas of competence. That I mentioned because there are people who undertake responsibilities only to please a superior without being able to do it, and that leads to serious problems. Then responsible communication, I already mentioned. Loyalty to contract obligation. This I think is very important because India is a country, Prime Minister Modi is very keen about mentioning ease of doing business. But one obstacle before the country's image is we are unable to enforce contracts. We make commitments, we never honor it, and then what is your credibility? So that I think is something, a virtue that has to be internalized by every aspiring engineer professional. The value system, of course, I would say, primary responsibility for ensuring safety of people who are likely to use products and that he or she designs. This I have already mentioned, but to reiterate that there is a element of involvement, personal involvement in realizing the responsibility to ensure that every product, it is thoroughness that is required. Nothing is left to chance, because what you are doing is likely to cause danger to somebody else. Then UCL plant at Bhopal I have mentioned, what was the result of the UCL plant? The worst tragedy, I think, apart from, of course, Fukushima and other nuclear reactors. But in industrial accident, I would say it is probably the worst ever happened. There, it was a matter of neglect of certain elements which are taken, which is very well known. Then responsibility for safety and risk assessment were seriously deficient. We say risk assessment is another important part which only an engineer can do, because only his professional knowledge enables him to foresee and to judge what risks can be involved. Then responsibility for ensuring freedom from damage or injury. That is well understood. Then risk assessment, I am speaking especially about whether engineering design complies with applicable laws. Because laws, the requirement of knowledge of the law is absolutely essential, I would say, for any kind of professional application of engineering skill. Then whether design meets standards of engineering principles. Again, something which is well understood, but requiring special attention. Then risk-benefit analysis to analyze risk and to decide whether project can proceed. This I mentioned to you about Sterlite or Niyamagiri or any other. I think risk analysis is, again, because it's not your exclusive or the engineering professional's exclusive responsibility. It is a management is also involved. But then, engineers also become managers. Most of them do become managers when at a particular time. So for them, this, I think, is an extremely important reason. And I was also in the financial corporation where we used to assess projects by technical competence and financial viability. That was the two considerations we had. So technical feasibility and financial viability is what we used to say. And I used to insist whether it's not merely a question of getting the money back, investment or what you call return, but then whether the person has the capability to understand the consequences, the dangers, the risks involved. That was also an assessment which I was quite keen about. Then prototypes and devices to be properly tested. This is something which goes without saying. Then public welfare. I generally have a lot of concern for that. I have specifically mentioned that somehow all my life I have been concerned with public interest and public welfare. However much people may disagree with what I say, but I have always believed that public welfare must be my prime consideration to identify and address legal and environmental issues related to projects, which I already mentioned, to make transparent and objective issues of permits for projects. This again is something which is, here, there the engineers, environmental engineers and others who have to advise and whose voice matters a lot. To prevent steps against illegal activities like hacking and cyber attacks is a new item. So, which is again part of the prevailing situation, to ensure quality of products and services. Then public health, again a matter, which has assumed importance. That's why I thought I would mention it for the students to know that these are concerns which require their personal attention and, serious thinking, serious, very serious reflection that public health deserves. And for them, each one of us is now today, I'm speaking to you from Calicut, and you are all sitting in different places. I was in Kanyapalli, Kamal Jyoti for the last 3-4 years. So we could have been sitting together today and then discussing all this, but for COVID. So this public health factor, I think, again, is a very crucial thing. Factors of pollution and toxicity of products to be strictly prevented. To follow, in fact, Amal Jyoti has a project, chemical project where the water testing in Pampa River is being tested, and does a lot of good, because Shabarimala is the very famous. I'm sure the same thing must be done in other places also. I don't know about Tirupati and all, but at Shabarimala, because the water is flowing close by there, of course, the hills, so you may not require it. But in other places where there were huge congregations, I was in Allahabad and Haridwar, 2 Kumbh Melas I have been looking after, so I know how important it is. And to follow quality standards about level of radiation from cell phones on tower, this is my apprehension. I don't know how far you would agree with your technical people. As a layman, I think it is something dangerous. Minimize emissions from industrial processes, strictly following pollution standards regarding air and water, and reporting potential risks to concerned authority. This, I think, is something which is often neglected because either out of fear, out of sheer indifference, or out of lack of concern for others. So this is something, it's a value which you have to instill in students, because only by explaining accidents and others, I think they will be able to make an impression on them. Conflict of value, this I already mentioned. Conflict of values, conflict between self-interest and public interest, generally absent in developmental works. Very often it doesn't happen, but environmental issues create conflicts between public and which I have mentioned. Strict avoidance of extraneous interest in vendor rating. This is from my own experience, so I told you about. Resistance to unethical pressures about wrong reporting and concealing information. This again is a matter, where ethical challenges would be there. Some questions are there. I'll discuss them. I mentioned this. Then ethical issues, specific examples, I have mentioned them only for the benefit of, not that you are unaware, but I thought I'll just to conclude, responsibility for protection of the public interest should not be sacrificed in the company's interest. This I firmly believe. Even if I lose my job, I would not do it. This was I'm not sure that all would agree, but I was very adamant in this, and I have stuck absolutely by this. Not that I have served in any company as a company official, but I served only as a teacher for 1 year. But after that, I have been in government service, but I made it a point that nothing should be allowed to go against this. Then honesty in research and testing. Then, of course, I mentioned the Galaxy Note 7 launched direct competition. This I got from somewhere, resulting in explosion of batteries. And Volkswagen emissions, this I read about in the paper. And failure inspection Fukushima, I believe it, even though I'm not very sure, but I think it was a failure. It's 15 minutes. So I thought I'll just rush through, because these are not matters which need any elaboration, but out of my experience, whatever struck me as relevant and useful for your students for integrating ethical principles and ethical, what you call guidelines for students to follow when they become professionals. That's why I thought I'll mention. With it, I'll close, and I would like to, if I can, because as I said, I'm neither an engineer nor a philosopher. I'm just a police officer with some interest in the subject. So please, you can tell me what questions are there. I saw a few coming, chatting. I am not able to, because my proficiency in computer is very bad. I cannot read out from there and all that. Yeah, would somebody mind reading them out, or can I separate?
Sir,
I don't know.
I shall read the questions to you.
Yeah, please. Please,
Sir, one question is,
you are speaking very feebly. Yeah,
sir,
please.
am I audible?
Now it's okay. No, it's okay.
Okay. So first question is, will the unethical behavior of superiors affect the psychology of teacher and student? If yes, how can it be rectified?
Yeah, it's a very important matter, I think, which affects every engineering college, every engineering teacher. So there are two issues to my mind in this. Number one is the unethical practices of a superior you are speaking about an environment of college, I think, because student and teacher is involved. So unethical practice of a superior, I would say, if it may relate to, in a college atmosphere, it may relate to a principal, for instance, or a manager, or the organization which runs it. For instance, many colleges are run by societies and by trusts and others. So unethical practices which come to your notice, or as a teacher or any other employee of the organization, are a matter of challenge to anybody. So the kind of ethics that I have been believing in would of course tell me that there are two ways of looking at it. One is to bring it to the notice of the superior that these are getting into public knowledge, and then it is quite injurious to both the organization and to the individual and to even to students, because this, for instance, a simple example. I mean, I'm not saying that it is absolutely hypothetical. I have no knowledge whether such a thing takes place. If suppose a large organization having several colleges under its management resort to, say, manipulating results, maybe by influencing their own teachers or something. This is something, which will definitely ruin the management and the entire reputation, because it can go out anywhere. This is one way of looking at it. Another way is, well, you can explain, for instance, if it is an individual student or group of students, a small group or something, you can explain by saying there are two limits which prohibit you from proceeding further than this. And your position can be made clear that even though I am aware of it, I am not. You see, there is something called whistleblowing, for instance. All of you would be familiar with the term. It's not easy to follow whistleblowing, because exposing your own organization or superior is not an easy task at all. The Julius Assange case and all, even today he's in hiding. America is hunting for him. So it's an extremely arduous course of action. So whistleblowing, if there is a law in whistleblowing, if it is to come, then maybe you will be protected. Other than that, I don't think there is any remedy lies in this, unless you are able to, in a situation like in a government service, you are only liable to be transferred, for instance, or you cannot be punished for doing something which is right, so you are able to defend yourself. But in other circumstances, I think your options are limited. This is all what I could say.
So the second question is, conflict between personal and professional commitment is very stressful to engineers. To which of these should engineers give more importance?
No, can you please repeat the first sentence?
Conflict between personal and professional commitment is very stressful to engineers. To which of these should engineers give more importance?
You see, it's a question of personal choice and your attitude towards your professional work. There cannot be any hard and fast rule saying invariably you have to provide space for both. Because instance, you're a father or a mother and a brother and a sister, your commitments are to the family, and your professional requirements are something which you cannot compromise, because that will affect your career, that will affect the career, that will affect your students, that will affect your entire image, as well as the reputation of the college or whatever it is. So there has to be a compromise. But to my mind, if I were to be in your position, I would definitely put my professional commitments first. I am sure most of you will not agree, but that is what I have been trained to do as a police officer. I would not say, had I been in a college or had I continued in IIT Chennai all the rest of my life and retired as a something, whatever. So whether I would have followed the same, I do not know, because the situation is very different. But in a public service, I'm sure I would put that first and then look after my personal commitments only secondary, subordinate.
Okay, sir. Next question. Rules should be observed in spirit or letter by letter?
Here again is a what you call a very difficult question to answer, because you see, rules, even the Supreme Court, for instance, recently gave judgments, where, they have also given, see, for instance, that Shaheen Bagh incident, if you read the Supreme Court judgment, you will find that, Supreme Court was clear about two things. Number one, that protest is essentially a form of dissent where without that democracy is dead. At the same time, you have to consider that public spaces cannot be occupied. So if you are to, and the Hindu editorial on that, I still remember, they said legality is one thing, whereas this particular element of lawfulness is certainly there, but legality is one aspect of it, but application of the law is something different. Very difficult to draw a line between the two, because you cannot say that, for the sake of, particular objective, you can block the public spaces. Very difficult. At the same time, the Hindu editorial forcefully argues, and very convinced, very persuasively, I would not say convincingly, persuasively argues that legality alone should not matter. Legitimacy is what matters, where you have to look at the costs, you have to look at the composition, you have to look at the circumstances. So following the letter of the law, say in another way of looking at it, for instance, if the police were to act according to only the letter of the law, without regarding, for instance, the sensitivity of an incident, like the Hathras incident, for instance, if there again, there's a great deal of controversy. In fact, unfortunately, my first posting was in Hathras as a subdivisional police officer. Unfortunately, in 1972, I joined. 69 I joined, but I was posted to Aligarh, and Hathras was my first post, independent charge as subdivisional police officer. This unfortunate incident has taken place. Very tragic, very traumatic. It's so painful. I don't even wish to remember that. But then the fact is, the police went by the letter of the law, I would say, in a particular sense. In the law, in the sense, you can put it either way, because the district magistrate would have ordered the cremation of the body at dead of night on this particular thing, that there should be no disturbance to the public order the next day. Maybe that is the reason. I don't know, I'm just speculating, because it can only infer certain things from the incidents. So the letter of the law says, if there is a prohibitory order, or there is an apprehension of the breach of the peace, the district magistrate or the police superintendent, for that matter, has to take every possible action to prevent that breach of peace. And their apprehension might have been that there would have been large crowds assembling, and there would have been a very great, provocation and a confrontation, which would have resulted in the death of many people. So this was considered expedient. I cannot use any other word, just expedient in interest of justice to do this. This is interpreting the law in a manner that you are following the, the letter of the law. Of course, the law does not say that you should do this or you should not. You only say that this is a policy. So in many other matters, letter of the law and the spirit of the law can be very different in very different situations. So as a matter of principle, it is definitely no doubt about the fact that the spirit of the law must be observed. But then very often you will find situations in which the letter of the law is not clear enough, rather vague or ambiguous, or not applicable in its entirety to the situation, where you will be compelled to take recourse to the letter of the law. That sense of the term.
Sir, would concentrating more on ethics in engineering colleges improve the society?
No, the first part I couldn't hear clearly.
Would concentrating more on ethics in engineering colleges improve the society?
You see, you are, connecting two different things, because entire society cannot be a beneficiary of whatever you do in the engineering college, because your society, of course, if you are speaking about the society of students and their families, I would definitely say yes. And secondly, the larger society stand to gain if you insist on ethics, and the students internalize those values, and if they are willing to implement and if they are committed to implementing them, definitely the larger society would also stand to gain in terms of quality, in terms of safety, in terms of public health, and all the values that we have mentioned. No doubt about that. I'm convinced about it, because I've convinced about the relevance of ethics in life, in work, in teaching, every aspect of life I have been concerned with. So I have no hesitation in saying it can definitely do a great of good to society as a whole.
Laws are not updated often or according to changing times. So should professionals put up with outdated laws?
It's a very large question. And in fact, it's a very universally admitted fact that society moves fast and laws follow late. So, for instance, all that is happening around us in terms of technological advancement and, women's empowerment or Dalit movements and student, youth movements and things like that, the law does not comprehend all this because at the time of making law, you will not be able to conceptualize or visualize what all future probabilities can arise, contingencies can arise. So the law has to be necessarily confined, like the Constitution of India. I mean, the supreme law of the land. It has to be, I think, 109th or 120th. I think probably the amendments is going on. So the law has to definitely keep in changing, to tune with changing times and changing circumstances. And it's the duty of professionals to bring it up whether as an organization, whether as a professional body or through the parliament or whatever. There is absolutely no doubt that professionals alone, like cybersecurity or now data, whether disclosure of data with data, the privacy of data that has been now breached in many instances where it has been handed over to private parties. So data management is, or even say, for instance, the controversy that is raging around media management, the social media as well as visual media. So professionals are the ones who can advise the lawmaking authority, and they have to put up their suggestions and they have to guide the lawmaking agency to bring it up, to give away, like Section 66 of the IT Act. It was advised by professionals, but unfortunately, I don't know whether it has had the desired effect, because it took away a great deal of protection for women against sexual exploitation through misuse of the media, misuse of the internet. So there can be some problems, but then it was well intended. But then earlier the Juvenile Justice Act, the age limit for major it was considered 18. Now it has been brought down to 16. So such laws, even though it is nothing peculiar, but then when you find that crime keeps on spiraling, you have to do something about it. So there are many situations. I'm not speaking only about crime because I'm more familiar with that, I was mentioning. But in regard to cybersecurity, in regard to privacy, in regard to data management, in regard to climate, in regard to all this, professionals alone can advise. So I think that is absolutely a must.
That was the end of the question answer session. Thank you, sir, for bringing in the allegory of the cave, indicating the ascent through stages from darkness to the light of values. We must be ready to come out of our confinements to understand the values of ethics, to realize that there are greater things to be gained in life. He unveiled to us the various ethical theories related to moral value, duty, virtue, using real examples relating to what sort of principles should guide you. This, of course, leaves us with the statement: as a professional, relationships are important, with utmost importance to efficiency and personal ethics. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. It was a great opportunity to speak to so many of professionals. I've enjoyed the time. I hope I've been able to, I know that my answers to your questions may not be all correct or complete, but whatever I could do, I have tried to do. And because of my very fond association with Amarjyoti, I was happy to come. Otherwise, normally, a person with my background in the police service should not venture to speak about ethics, as that's the normal perception about the police. But somehow, fortunately, they know me. And then since I have followed a certain code of conduct, I thought I can share my ideas with you. Thank you all very much. Nice having, it was a great experience being with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, dear participants. Participants can now fill the feedback form and the attendance sheet, and you can rejoin back at 2 p.m. for the next session.